Welcome back. We are ready for lesson 24, Elijah. The story can be found 1 Kings chapter 17 through 2 Kings chapter 2. We find that the story of Elijah occurs during the reign of Ahab over Israel. Now, according to 1 Kings chapter 16, verses 29 to 33, he was very evil. In fact, verse 30 says he did more evil than any king who had ever been before him. Why? Verse 31 says he even married Jezebel. Anybody who's heard any stories knows that that name, Jezebel, is associated with evil itself. Again, a man that, well, he was definitely influenced by who he married. We find that because of the evil, because of all the things that transpired, because of all the things that took place, God, it was time for him to deal with Israel, with Ahab, and to get their attention. So he called Elijah. Now, Elijah was to go approach unto this king and explain to him that from God he had heard there would be no dew or rain for the next however long. We're not really told for sure in the beginning, but he just basically was telling God's shutting it off till y'all begin to listen, begin to wake up. And so he goes, chapter 17, verse 1, and he announces it to Ahab. As soon as he announces it, very wisely, he leaves. At first, Ahab probably thought it was, you know, ridiculous. This man that thinks he knows the weather. Yeah, right. They didn't even have weather forecasting back then. But bottom line, he probably didn't pay much attention to it at first. But then when no dew and no rain, and no dew and no rain. Uh-oh. And no and it continues to go. Then he begins to get mad at him because he accuses him of being the problem maker. So God hides Elijah at the brook Cherith and he feeds him with ravens. And he drank from the brook. So he's fed by the birds and drank from the brook. And the brook dried up. So then he sent him to Zarephath. And he said, there's a widow there that's going to take care of you. So he goes there to Zarephath and he meets this widow coming out to make a last meal for her and her son. And he says, hey, why don't you feed me instead? She says, pardon me? And he says, yeah, feed me instead. God will take care of us. She recognized him as a prophet of God, I guess. Anyhow, she gave him the last meal, and he says, okay, go back and check. And she went back, and guess what? There was just a little grain, a little bit of oil, just enough to make another meal for her and her son. Next meal time, she goes back and checks, and guess what? There's just enough meal left to feed all of it. And this continues. We're not sure how long she was actually there, but or after he had been there for a while, her son died. And she went to him and said, what are you doing? I thought you were helping my son. And he said, hey. So he prays for her son. Her son is restored back to life. So this is the way God works. Not only is he taking care of Elijah, he's actually blessing someone else who's willing to listen, to obey, and to serve. Well, in the third year, we're guessing the third year of drought, probably, he is sent to meet with Ahab, chapter 18, verses 1 to 16. En route, he meets Obadiah, one of Ahab's servants, and he says, hey, and Obadiah goes, you're Elijah. Yeah, I got a message for your king. Would you go get him for me? Well, sir, king has been searching all over the place trying to find you, planning on killing you, getting rid of you because of all the trouble you brought, that he thinks you brought to Israel. If I go and tell him you're here and he comes here and you're not here, he's going to kill me. Elijah said, don't worry about it. I'll be right here when he gets here. Obadiah says, okay. So he goes, he gets Ahab, he brings Ahab, and the first thing out of Ahab's mouth is, oh, there's trouble in Israel. Elijah sets him straight. Oh, no, I'm not the problem. You are. You and your sins and what you're doing is what's caused all this problem. But I want to prove that point to you. So, yeah, what makes you think you got the answer? So I want you to gather the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of the goddess Asher. Let's see, 450, 400. That's 850 prophets altogether. And I want you to bring them here, and we're going to have a contest. One man, 850 prophets. This sounds interesting. Ahab realizes, well, this might be a way to solve the problem. He rounds up the prophets and brings them there, and he says, here's what we're going to do. Y'all build an altar, sacrifice to your God, cry out. The God that answers with fire, let him be God. So he lets them go first. They build their altars, they make their sacrifice. They don't put any fire on it, though. And they begin to cry out and yell and scream, and Elijah's back relaxing. Ah, ah, whew. Hey, y'all better get a little louder. I don't think your God's hearing you. I don't know if that's exactly the way it worked, but something similar to that. Anyhow, they begin to cut themselves. They begin to do everything they could trying to get their God's attention. Well, guess what? No fire came down. The sacrifice wasn't burned. The day was coming towards an end. It was getting the time of the evening sacrifice. Elijah says, well, I guess they're all passed out everywhere. I guess they're done. My turn. Let's put the sacrifice over here, put it on the altar, dig a trench around it. Do what? Dig a trench around it. Yeah. Oh, and pour a lot of water over it. Now, wait a second. I thought the object was to burn the sacrifice up. Well, I think Elijah's making a point. So they dig a trench, they pour enough water that it fills the trench up. He says, okay, y'all, step back. It's time. Okay, God, it's all up to you. And boom, fire from heaven comes down, licks up every drop of water, and literally consumes the sacrifice. Elijah said, if the Lord is God, follow him. And he kills all those false prophets while he's at it. But he tells them, make up your mind. Who are you going to serve? Then he goes out and says, okay, it's time for rain now. He goes up on top of the mountain, he begins to pray, and he sends a servant out. Go out and check it out. Servant goes out, servant looks and says, I don't see anything. Go back and look again. He comes back and says, yeah, I see a small cloud out there about the size of a man's hand. He said, hey, you better pack up and let's get back because it's getting ready for a deluge. He runs down, tells Ahab, says, you better get in town or you're going to get wet. Well, by now, Ahab's learning he better listen up to Elijah. He heads towards town, and Elijah outruns him. He's in a chariot with horses. But Elijah's under the anointing of God's Spirit. He runs past him, runs in town, and God sends rain. Well, you would think Ahab would have wised up. Not too much. But meanwhile, back with Elijah. Wow. Talk about a man. Yeah. He's got. But Jezebel sends out word in chapter 19. I'm going to kill him just like he killed all my prophets. He's going to be just as dead as. And so Elijah packs up and runs away. You think, why did he do that? Well, because he was a man. And he knew she planned on doing what she said. He didn't know what else to do. Well, God comes down, strengthens him, gives him strength, takes him out into the middle of the wilderness and puts him in a cave for a little while. Elijah is he's down in the molly grubs. Gloom, despair, and agony on me. Deep, dark depression, excessive misery. I don't know if that was really what he was singing, but it seems to be what he was thinking. And so he was waiting, trusting that God would reveal himself. God sets him there, and he's back in that cave. And all of a sudden, he hears a powerful wind. And he runs to the mouth of the cave and looks out. And I mean, wow, if it's a tornado or what it was, but it was a powerful rain. He goes, wow. He's safe in the cave, but doesn't see God anywhere. Oh. So he goes back into the cave, sits down and waits. Oh no. All of a sudden, an earthquake hits, shakes the place. He runs to the mouth of the cave to see what's going on and looks out. All this power, this earthquake. Wow. It's amazing. But God's not in the earthquake. Wow. By now, I'm sure he's, number one, he's still discouraged. Number two, he's wondering, what in the world? God, are you going to talk to me or not? I mean, wow, I've seen wind, I've seen earthquake, and I smell something. It smells like smoke. What in the world? He goes out and looks, and fire is sweeping across the place, burning up everything in sight. He goes, whoa, I'm glad I'm in the cave. Are you there, God? Wow. God wasn't in the fire either. And he goes back in again and sits down. What's it going to take, God? And all of a sudden, in the quietness, he hears a gentle whisper. God says, go back. I've got work for you to do. I'm not finished yet. I'll take care of you. Just follow my directions. Anoint Hazael as the king over Aram. And then anoint Jehu. He's going to be the next king over Israel. Oh, and anoint Elisha as the next prophet. Now, the good way to keep Elijah and Elisha separate is to remember J comes before S. Elijah was first. He anointed Elisha. He went, chapter 19, verses 19 to 21, he anoints him, and Elisha's out plowing. And Elisha leaves, and we're not going to spend a lot of time because we'll talk about this on the next lesson. But he follows after him, becomes his servant, because he's the one that's to take over in time for him. Although Elisha doesn't know that yet. Well, God sends him back to Ahaziah again. We find in 2 Kings chapter 1. But it's kind of preluded because what happens is Ahaziah, we find he falls from the lattice of the upper room in Samaria and he injures himself. So he sends messengers and he says, go consult Beelzebub, the god of Ekron. He doesn't want to talk to the God of Israel, no. He doesn't want Elijah. Go consult Beelzebub to see if I'll recover. And he sends messengers. Well, God tells Elijah. He intercepts the messengers. And he says, hey, guys, where are you going? Oh, we're going to contact Beelzebub to see if King Ahaziah is going to live or not. He says, what? Is there no God in Israel? Well, you can go back and tell the king that you met me and that God says he's going to survive, but he's going to actually die in the bed of his sickness. Huh? That's kind of strange. Well, they go back and tell the king, and the king says, wow, he never has anything good to say to me or about me. Still blaming Elijah rather than looking inside and dealing. Once again, the story could have ended totally different had he allowed himself to deal with the sin. He could have been forgiven. The outcome would have been different. But because he refused to, he not only refuses to, he sends out a company of soldiers to get Elijah to kill him. Elijah's sitting up on the hill, mountain watching. He sees all these soldiers coming. He says, who are they, God? Oh, I see. They're coming to arrest me. And then he begins to sing a song. I'm not sure what it was, but it might have been something like, oh, Lord, send the fire right now. Oh, Lord, send the fire right now. May not have been that song, but whatever the song was, fire came to heaven and killed, burned up every one of the soldiers. Well, they don't return, so the king wonders what's happened. So he sends out a second company of soldiers. They get there, they come to the base of the hill, they're looking around at all the ashes, and they're looking up and they go, oh no. Sure enough, Elijah looks out and he says, oh Lord, send the fire just now. Oh Lord, send the fire just now. And fire fell from heaven and burned them all up. Now the king sends out a third company. The third commander gets there with his soldiers, and I mean, the ashes are getting deep. And he looks up and he says, "Sir, please don't burn us up. We're only doing what we're told to do. We promise we won't harm you." Elijah said, "You sure about that?" Or Elijah said, "Then I'll go with you. Okay, take me in." So they took him into the king, and he told the king straight up what was happening. Well, the king didn't die from the sickness, but he was killed in the bed before he could get out following the sickness, just like God had said would happen. Well, the final part of Elijah's story laps over into Elisha's. So for now, let me just say in 2 Kings chapter 2, Elijah is caught up into heaven in a whirlwind. Wow, what a way to leave. What a man. But yet, even though he was mightily used of God, he foretold the drought, he foretold the rain, he called fire down from heaven and burned up a sacrifice, killed 850 prophets. Oh, and called fire down from heaven and burned up 2 companies of soldiers. Wow. But yet, even a man like Elijah could get discouraged. I'd like to look for a few moments at a question that troubles many. How do we handle times of depression? I mean, how could Elijah get discouraged, for crying out loud? And I'm here to tell you, I think at one time or another, to one degree or another, it probably happens to every one of us. Usually, not always, but usually, the hardest times and the toughest times will be immediately following a high point in our life. We have a great victory. Remember, he had a great victory. Rain and the absence of rain and the coming of rain and the defeating all these other prophets, the highlight. And yet after that, Jezebel sets out to kill him and he runs off. So not always, but a lot of times following a high point. So it doesn't mean we don't enjoy the high points. Enjoy them when you have them, but don't get your eyes on them. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Step one, when you feel that depression, don't try to pretend it's not there. Don't try to ignore it. No. Number one, don't focus on it. Instead, focus on Jesus. Hold firmly to your faith in Jesus Christ. Hebrews 4:14 and 15 says, "Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. We have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he was without sin." The whole book of Hebrews talks about who Jesus is. And the secret of overcoming, the secret of happiness, of joy, of everything else is keeping our eyes on him. Just briefly, what, just who is this high priest? What basis does he have to claim that he is this answer? Well, according to the writer of Hebrews, which I still kind of lean towards Paul, but we don't really know for sure. It doesn't really matter. Ultimately, God's the writer. They were simply the secretary anyhow. But here's what we find out. Hebrews 1:4 shares with us that Jesus was greater. It says he became as much superior to the angels as the name he has inherited is superior to theirs. He has a greater name. He is superior to the angels. In fact, the whole theme of the book of Hebrews is Jesus is better. And what the writer does is he takes all of the greats in the Israel faith, the Jewish faith, he takes everything that they consider great and important, and one by one begins to show Jesus surpasses all of them. He's more superior than the prophets, more superior than the angels. Hebrews 3:3 says he is greater than Moses. He's been found worthy of greater honor than Moses, just as the builder of the house has more honor than the house itself. We go on down to Hebrews chapter 6:20 through chapter 7, verse 4, and it says he was greater than Abraham. Well, in fact, it refers us back to when Abraham offered tithing to Melchizedek. And Jesus is said to be of the order of Melchizedek. And we're not totally who this Melchizedek was. Well, we have some suspicions about who he might have been, because it says he was without beginning, without ending. He was a king of Salem, Salem, which means peace. He was without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, like the Son of God. He remains a priest forever. I'm kind of wondering if maybe it might have been Jesus incarnate, well, not incarnate, he didn't become flesh, but revealing himself before he became incarnate, before he became man, before he assumed the title of Jesus. May not be, we don't know for sure, but whoever it was, he fulfilled everything that Abraham or that Melchizedek portrayed, and yet Abraham offered tithing to him. And you see, the lesser offers the tithing to the greater. So if he's of the order of Melchizedek, that means he's greater than Abraham. Oh, and he's greater than the Levitical priesthood. Hebrews 7:21 and 22 says he became a priest with an oath when God said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. Because of this oath, Jesus has become the guarantee of a better covenant. Wow. He's greater than the Old Testament sacrifices. Hebrews 10:11 to 14 talks about how every day a priest would stand and perform his religious duties again and again. And then he would come back the next day, and then he'd come back the next day, and he'd come back the next day. But in verse 12, it says, when this priest, Jesus, had offered for all time one sacrifice for sins, himself, he sat down at the right hand of God. To set down signifies his job was completed. Reminds you of Jesus' final words on the cross. It is finished. The price was paid. Forgiveness was available. It is finished. By one sacrifice, he made for perfect forever those that are being made holy. You see, this is who Jesus is. That's the reason the claim is made with total, absolute clarity that Jesus is the only way. In fact, he himself said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Yes, this is Jesus. He's better than all the greats put together, not only of the Jewish people, but of all time, all history, every great person you can think of, all of them combined. Jesus is still greater. He's still better. And because of that, only Jesus can lead us into the true rest of God. Hebrews 4:3 says, now we who have believed enter that rest, just as God has said. So I declared an oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest, and yet his work has been finished since the creation of the day. That rest is still there. The Israelite nation failed because of disobedience, but the writer of Hebrews says it's still available. But the only way into it is through Jesus. Romans 5:1 says, therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Oh, don't misunderstand me. Only Jesus can do it. He is the way, the truth, and the life. There is no other way. And that's the reason our world will never experience total peace unless it turns to Jesus. And yet at the same time, that's why all those who put their hope and their trust in Jesus can experience total peace, even though the world around them is in total turmoil. It's a peace from within, the peace that Jesus promised his disciples that he would come, they would bring to them. Hebrews 4:11 says, therefore, let us make every effort to enter that rest so that no one will fail by following the Israelites' example of disobedience. No, enter the rest. Come into Jesus. Surrender your life to him. It's a partial peace that's available right now, right where you're at, no matter what you're facing. And it's available to you for the rest of your life upon this earth. But more importantly, it's an eternal peace that will last for all eternity in the presence of God himself. So that peace is there and it's available even when we face confusion, we face disappointment, we face anger, we face all these things. What do? Turn to Jesus. Turn to Jesus. Look to him for peace, for rest, for strength. Hold on to who he is. Hold on to his promise because he's promised to never leave us and never forsake us. Secondly, step 2, get alone with God. Hebrews 4:16 says, let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Don't go running here and there and here and there and here and there and everywhere else, all over the place, trying to find it. No. The first step, get alone with God. Go to the source of peace. Go to the source of answers. Look to him. Wrap yourself up in him. There you can receive strength and you can receive direction. Read his word. Read it. Go. Lay it out before God. Read it. Ask him to reveal himself through his word to you. The miracles is found through his word. It's not in the book itself. It's in the message that's there, which is God's message to you. Get alone with him. Spend some time with him. Too many times, what we do instead is start yelling, screaming, shouting, fussing, looking to the people that are making the most noise. No, no, no. Remember Elijah? Mighty wind. God wasn't in it. Earthquake. God wasn't in it. Fire. Wow. God wasn't in it. But a still, small, gentle voice. If we're not careful, sometimes our activities and our talking and our yelling and our everything that we do running from here to there can get in the way of hearing God's voice. Doesn't mean that we don't have to do anything. Yeah, we need to make effort. Hebrews 4:11 said, make every effort to enter that rest. We need to put out effort. We need to work on it. But first of all, we need to get directions from God, find peace from him, get alone with him, and then do what he tells us to do. Follow his direction. In fact, just a little rule of thumb that I've come up with typically when you're facing a place and you know which way to turn, generally speaking, it's best not to make a decision until the fog is cleared. Because if we make the decision in the middle of the fog, it'll probably be the wrong one. So get alone with God. Get alone until he can bring peace and give direction and lift the fog. And then get up and go again. Hebrews 12:2 says, let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. He's the originator, the one that started it. He's the perfecter. He's the one that brings it to perfection. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 says, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received. Hold on to your faith. Get alone with God. Listen. Walk in obedience to what he shares with you and walk in his peace and get up and go again. But always keep your eyes on Jesus. God bless you.